Man, where do we start on this thing? I want to spend just a little time on before we get to the meat of this, but your thoughts on the State of the Union last night?
It would be fine if it had been connected to any reality. The reality is we've got the highest inflation since the Carter administration that's killing American families at an average rate of $276 per month in additional cost year over year. We've got the highest gas prices in a very long time, and they're about to go up substantially more. We've more than doubled the price of gasoline since President Biden took office. You look at what's going on in terms of foreign policy, and there was a failed withdrawal from Afghanistan that cost us a lot of credibility across the globe and put people in danger and put their lives on the line for us. And we've got essentially we're on the precipice of what could end up being World War III, given the actions in Russia. And I think it was a catastrophic failure a few weeks ago when he said there was no potential for military intervention. I think it was a continued catastrophic failure last night for him to say there was no potential for military intervention. And this is not me calling for hawkish sending of American troops into Ukraine. I just don't think you ever take options off the table when you're dealing with an autocratic dictator who's clearly a strong man. And I think we have conveyed weakness in a way that invites this kind of conflict. So, I mean, apart from all that, everything is going swimmingly.
Well, it was at best a textbook lesson, I think, in hypocrisy, the whole thing. After spending trillions of dollars with all of these contracts, which, by the way, I mentioned that we ordered when they said order your test, your COVID test, when they made this proclamation. It was a month ago. I asked my wife, I said, order them and just see what the heck happens. And you could get 4. Well, we got 2, and again, they came in and they were from China, believe it or not, with Chinese markings that we couldn't even read. But then a follow-up story on this. After spending literally billions of dollars on things like this, my understanding, I hope I'm not wrong, but the update I saw, 2/3 of these things are in a warehouse somewhere, not being used. So after all of this, he had the audacity to say that by the end of the year, the deficit will be down to less than half of what it was before I took office. I'm the only president ever to cut the deficit by more than $1 trillion in a single year.
Well, I mean, it's completely disingenuous, right? Because spending went up by $3 or $4 trillion during the course of the COVID pandemic. So if you're saying you cut it by $1 trillion, we're still $2 trillion over the baseline that we were at pre-pandemic. It's a ridiculous statement. I mean, the other thing that struck me, Paul, is that essentially the science ended COVID on the day of the State of the Union. How very convenient that the CDC decided to announce that essentially this thing is over. We don't need a mask anymore on the day of the State of the Union. That's not the science. That's political science dictating this stuff. I'd say one other thing quickly. I think what we saw last night in part was a result of desperation in response to polling. And you saw it in unique moments. So there was a time where he made the point or tried to make the point, hey, I'm a capitalist. I want to remind you that I'm a capitalist over and over and over again. Well, that's because the American people are rejecting the idea of transferism or socialism. And he knows it. And then he went and made the point that we're not for defunding the police. We're for funding the police more. That's because they know that the message that they've been driving for 2 years against law and order, against safety in communities, is horribly blowing up on them. And so they've got to change the rhetoric. But you literally see him responding to polling during the course of last night's State of the Union. I just think it's disconnected from the American people. It's disconnected from reality. The question in my mind is, will Republicans snatch defeat from the jaws of victory? Because everything about this setup would suggest that midterms are going to be a Republican wave and the presidency is up for grabs in 2024. The question is can we actually recruit sane people, say sane things, connect with the American people, and provide real solutions? If we do that, Republicans are going to regain power.
Speaking of the height of hypocrisy, and it was all through this, here's one cut.
If we're to advance liberty and justice, we need to secure our border and fix the immigration system.
That's beyond me. For a guy who's opened the border, who stopped all of the construction, who's a multitude. But that was the least of the hypocrisy. Sitting behind him were two of the most vacuous individuals, the most vacuous vessels politically, was Kamala Harris, the vice president, and Nancy Pelosi. To have them stand up and clap to this, with all of the statements in the archives, it's dripping with hypocrisy.
For us to advance liberty and justice, we need to secure our border and fix the immigration system.
Man. At least they stood up with Ted Cruz and the rest of the Republicans who also said, hey, this is a good deal. Let's just fulfill that damn promise.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think that's another one of those instances of them doing polling and recognizing that their point of view is not accepted by the vast majority of Americans. Most Americans recognize that we should be accepting of immigrants. There should be an orderly system of immigration. We should modernize the system. But that doesn't require that we fling wide the gates and not exercise a modicum of security. Yeah. And the truth is, they've been oriented around the idea of just flinging wide the gates and not worrying about who comes in and comes out of the country. A nation without borders is not a sovereign nation. And so it's good to see them coming around, but they're coming around because of political expediency and not because of change in perspective.
They've done what they've always done as Democrats, certainly in the last 10 or 15 years, more so than ever before. They are chameleons. Whatever the color is that they think they can retain power or get power, they will change at that particular time. Doesn't matter. There's no meat on the bones on this one. At the same time, there was a report yesterday, I don't know if you saw this, but the new immigration data was released and shows that illegal immigration has soared since Biden took office in some locations more than 200%. That wasn't an accident. These were because of the policies. One other thing on this last night, when he started talking about the military, I don't know if you watched this, trying to minimize his failure in Afghanistan, it was too much for Representative Boebert.
Numbness, dizziness, a cancer that would put them in a flag-draped coffin. I know.
13.
One of those.
Did you catch that part?
I did. I think that Marjorie Taylor Greene and Lauren Boebert arguably create a problem for the Republican Party, though. Mm-hmm. I think that their brand is viewed similarly to the brand of AOC, or how we view AOC, and that they're incredibly polarizing people. I think that Republicans and conservatives have a unique opportunity to remind people that we do have an ideology, that we do have a set of solutions, and that we can actually make this country better relative to what the liberals are doing. We just can't play their same